the Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get your free financial survival toolkit and find out where to buy gold and silver safely at great prices. Sign up at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network, which is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been in business selling gold since 1990, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. To find out more, go to milesfranklin.com or call them at 800-822-8080 and get a free quote. Sometimes in your internet travels, you come across sites that just blow you away. The excellence, the quality of the writing, and the grasp of important economic issues, and most importantly, the ability to communicate them. And one such blog that I've really gotten into lately is called Azizonomics. It's run by John Aziz, who's on with me now from the UK to discuss the latest financial chaos and how to prevent collapse. Hey, John, welcome to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I am really happy to have you on. I know you don't do many of these interviews.
Good to be Kerry.
So you've been writing this blog for a while. What's your background?
I'm just a kid. I'm 25. I studied English in college, so my background is writing, really. I know you complimented me on my writing style. That's my background. My background isn't economic analysis or trading. I've done quite a bit of trading for myself, mostly accumulating precious metals. But
that's an easy one. That's an easy call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I could tell that because the caliber of your writing is far and above. And I read a lot. I probably read 100 different blogs, newspapers, articles. And when somebody is a really good writer, it shows because it's very difficult to take Austrian economics, to take Keynesian, to take neoclassical and translate it in a way that the average person, that you can understand it, that you get insight into what's really going on in the world, because all the language and so much of what the powers that be put out is propaganda that's designed to deceive you and to make you believe that everything is hunky-dory, as we say in the States, or fine and dandy, as the late George Carlin used to say, when it's neither fine nor dandy. You got into this. How did you get into writing economics when you had an English background?
Mainly reading Zero Hedge, to be honest. You know, in 2008, I was looking for answers like everyone else, and I read, all the mainstream stuff, the Economist, Bloomberg, and, eventually I found kind of the more alternative financial media, because I found a lot of the mainstream discussions to be, well, I suppose the word's propagandistic. I was looking for something else. I was looking for all of the alternative explanations and to see things from every perspective that I could. And so I read Zero Hedge. I've been reading that since it's been going. I study a lot of data on the Federal Reserve website, and gradually I kind of started putting together by reading other economic blogs and doing a lot of thinking and talking to as many people as I could. I gradually began to put together my own kind of worldview and my own kind of conclusions. And so I started writing in July last year. So I've been doing this for almost a year. I write every day. I'm on Zero Hedge pretty much every day. So I'm just enjoying writing at the moment. I'm enjoying building an audience and interacting with people and learning. I approach economics as a student. I don't really pretend to be an expert. I'm constantly learning and constantly accumulating new perspectives, and I'm trying to be as aware of my own ignorance as I possibly can be.
Well, I wish other people, such as the Ben Bernanke and all of these people who think that they're masters of the universe, that they know what's happening and that they can control the events, would take a little humility pill and admit that they can't control things. And what's the best way? It's just like you got this building that you don't want anymore. It's 25 stories. It's in the middle of London. and you need to get rid of it. You can't really bring in cranes. So you bring in the demolition expert, and they figure out where to put the charges so that the thing will just implode straight down, not do any harm, and be able to be carted off with a minimum of effort. And that's what needs to be done with our current economic system. It needs to be imploded with the least possible fallout and damage and replaced by hopefully a more modern and better run and better thought out edifice.
Well, that's right. Not only, I mean, because human behavior, which is economics. I mean, economics is a study of human behavior. Not only is human behavior kind of fundamentally unpredictable, it's also fundamentally uncontrollable. And the history of economics is, as Joseph Schumpeter put it, it's a history of creative destruction. You have a system that is built up. It's the best system that could be built at the time, based on present knowledge, and the system runs and runs and runs, and I suppose there's usually an element of corruption, and ultimately the system ends up destroying itself, and people learn the lessons and build a new system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it, creative destruction, but they won't allow that to happen, and they just keep escalating the debt, and this can't have a good outcome. There's no question. And you've got...
What we're seeing here is a fundamental hostility to creative destruction. The Federal Reserve System, as it stands, is fundamentally hostile to the idea of liquidation. And when you have excessive debt, when you've built up from, in the 1960s, what was 120% of GDP to what's 360% of GDP total debt today, the level of interest and the level of repayment makes asset prices at that high level unsustainable because people are paying down debt. And so what happens naturally in a system of creative destruction is that people can't afford to pay the debt, so asset prices fall, and you get this spiral of debt deflation, liquidation, which takes the economy back down to a sustainable level, to what, as Ron Paul has said, to whatever level asset prices are sustainable at. And that's what happened before we had the Fed. And yes, that's dangerous and scary. I mean, life is dangerous and scary. The world's a dangerous and scary place. But what the Fed's done is it's kind of engineered this situation where we don't have that kind of natural creative destruction anymore in the debt cycle. And so we're stuck with all this debt, and they'll print all this money to stabilize asset prices, but we've still got the debt. And, I mean, quantitative easing and the zero interest rate policy is aimed explicitly at, one thing, which is creating more debt. It's a debt additive policy. And so what really needs to happen is that the debt relative to GDP needs to be dramatically shrunk so we can get back to growth. But that isn't happening. And, Japan has been in this deleveraging trap now for 20 years. And I was looking at their total debt figures, and it's not falling at all. It's higher than it was when they first hit the deleveraging trap. I mean, the government debt, in particular in Japan, has gone up and up and up because, when the private sector can't afford to consume, what we see, and we're seeing this in the United States, is that the government's economic participation rate goes up to support demand, and the government takes on more and more debt. And ultimately, that's going to be unsustainable. There are three routes out of our problem. Number one is the natural route, which is liquidation, where, as I described, you get a debt deflationary cycle, and prices fall until they're sustainable. And that's dangerous and scary, and the Fed won't allow that. And that's off the table, according to, the monetary policy wizards in their ivory towers. Number two is you have a debt jubilee, which is actually the Wall Street Journal editorial page will hate me for talking about this because it's contrary to the interest of the people who own all the debt and all the treasuries. But it's a Christian principle, I mean, in Christian societies traditionally, debt was forgiven every 7 years, and that if you ask me, that's quite a sensible idea because it clears out the debt and it allows for new growth. And
but that's also what would be called an asset jubilee, because in our society today, your debt is somebody else's asset. So that would really fall on the financial system. So,
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But when the financial system's assets are the thing that's a weight on the economy, and the economy can't grow, and you've got, real unemployment, U6 is, 16-17%?
Oh, sure.
And
easy.
You're not having new growth. I mean, we need to reduce the debt. And I'm looking at the I'm just looking at the options. And the third option, of course, is inflation, which is probably, while the other two are off the table, while the Federal Reserve won't consider liquidation, the free market solution, and they won't consider the debt jubilee, the Christian solution, the third option is the Keynesian solution, which is inflation.
And that's the most disruptive, according to Keynes. When you debase a currency, it really strikes to the heart of the society. But politically, it's the easiest way to do it because nobody has to get up before the public and say, look, here are our options. And we could do it this way, but this is the worst. And it protects the banksters till the end. And we could go on talking about it for a long time. In a way, default really amounts to a jubilee as well. It's just extra legal, a jubilee. It's a proclamation or a law, which in the U.S., they couldn't even do it under the Constitution. Not that anybody looks at that anymore, but there is a thing called the Contracts Clause in the Constitution that prohibits the government from passing laws to modify contracts that are already in place. Now, they did it.
That's correct. There's been one of my favorite economists. He's actually a Keynesian. Steve Keen. Mm-hmm. He talks about doing it by doing it through the Fed, which is you print the money and you send checks to the public, and they have to pay down debt before they can spend anything. That's written into the rules. And if you don't have any debt, then you can invest the money. Obviously, that is going to be inflationary.
Oh yeah.
But at least it addresses the problem of too much debt, as opposed to the quantitative easing, which is more debt.
Yeah, well, there was I don't know if you ever caught our little comic cartoon called South Park, but at one time there's a show called Margaritaville, and everybody's broke, everybody's going bankrupt, and the kid returns his father's margarita maker to the finance company and gets an unlimited credit card, and rather than go buying stuff, he uses his no-limit credit card to pay off everybody else's debt, so they start spending again. And it's just life imitating South Park is what we're looking at. And
Trey Parker and Matt Stone are very wise people. They're libertarians, if I recall correctly.
I would say so, and they're onto something there. So we've got to get rid of the debt. It can't be paid, and inflation is the worst possible alternative, yet it's the most politically feasible because people are ignorant, is what it comes down to, right?
Well, the interesting thing is it may be the most politically feasible of the three in terms of getting us out of the deleveraging trap, but it's not that politically feasible because you've got the creditors, like the Chinese government, who own all this American debt, who don't want to see their assets being inflated away. Yeah. So they're exerting all this leverage on the U.S. government to not print as much money as, Paul Krugman would like. So, I mean, Ben Bernanke it's very interesting because from the Austrian point of view, Ben Bernanke is the big money printer. But from Paul Krugman's point of view, Ben Bernanke is not a big money printer at all. He's a coward who won't accept more than 2% inflation.
He's a minor leaguer. And it's funny. I don't know if you caught the smackdown of Paul Krugman. He was doing an address. He obviously got a free trip to Spain to some institute. What's that?
With Pedro Schwartz.
Yeah.
Austrian economist.
Yeah. And I learned something very interesting is that when a Spaniard is giving you a compliment, you better get ready for the knife that's following it, because they would flatter him. The first time he fell for it, and they totally, it was such a great book. It was well written, and you did such a good job, and, I understood it. But, you can't just print money and expect nothing to happen. And they just tore him to shreds under the flattery and then the knife between the ribs strategy. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I ended up feeling kind of sorry for him, actually. It was a smackdown. I mean,
it was an ambush. no doubt they sent him an invitation. It was probably engraved on a gold plate saying, we're here to honor your work, 40 years and your Nobel Prize, a special private reception. And then there's everybody there and they rip him to shreds. And he's so vain that he fell for it because he didn't do an internet search and find out who these people really were. So beware.
Well, he believes he has the right solution, and he'll go and talk his solution. And I give him credit for debating Ron Paul on Bloomberg. I just fundamentally disagree with him because he sees the problem as too little aggregate demand. I see the problem as too much debt.
Yeah, well, because the Krugmans of the world, and you alluded to this briefly, John, they don't really understand how wealth gets created through deferred consumption and savings. They don't have a clue about that. As far as they're concerned, wealth gets created from demand, and savings and wealth are functions of demand, not functions of deferred consumption. And as long as these guys are in charge, you'll never get a true market rate of return on your savings because they're going to keep these interest rates as low as they can because it's all about demand and none of it is about investment. And we could go on a long time, and we will have you back on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And your site again, just spell it out for us so we can find it. I highly, highly recommend it.
AZIZONOMICS.com, or as you Americans say, AZIZONOMICS.com.
And just pronounce your last name for us because I know I won't do it justice.
John Aziz.
Azizonomics.com. It's a great site, and it's one of my go-to sites now.
Yeah, I appreciate your support, Kerry, and thanks for having me on.
It's really been a pleasure. We're going to be going back to you because you're so clear, probably because you're not an economist, you're a writer. And you're a great communicator, and we need more because it's really hard to explain this stuff to the average person. Hey, well, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Take care.
You too.